Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome back to our Barakah programs. Apologies, we took a bit of a break to get started again. Inshallah you enjoyed the Shahr Ramadan program. We really enjoyed it, and alhamdulillah we did receive a lot of good feedback. You're welcome to provide feedback at any point. If you enjoyed the programs, if you want to see something different next year, we always welcome that feedback. Inshallah it was a spiritual month for you all. We did take a bit of a break just because we have a number of exciting programs coming up, and we've been busy just getting them ready. Inshallah, we'll talk a little bit more about those after the talk, inshallah. Without further ado, we'll get started with recitation of the Holy Quran. Please welcome Brother Mustafa Ziyara for the loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. براءة من الله ورسوله إلى الذين عاهدتم من المشركين فسيحوا في الأرض 4 أشهر واعلموا أنكم غير معجز الله وأن الله مخزي الكافرين. وأذان من الله ورسوله إلى الناس يوم الحج الأكبر أن الله بريء من المشركين ورسوله فإن تبتم فهو خير لكم وإن توليتم فاعلموا أنكم غير معجز الله وبشر الذين كفروا بعذاب أليم. إلا الذين عاهدتم من المشركين ثم لم ينقصوكم شيئا ولم يظاهروا عليكم أحدا فاتموا إليهم عهدهم إلى مدتهم إن الله يحب المتقين. فإذا انسلخ الأشهر الحرم فاقتلوا المشركين حيث وجدتموهم وخذوهم واحصروهم واقعدوا لهم كل مرصد فإن تابوا وأقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة فخلوا سبيلهم إن الله غفور رحيم. وإن أحد من المشركين استجارك فأجره حتى يسمع كلام الله ثم أبلغه مأمنه ذلك بأنهم قوم لا يعلمون. كيف يكون للمشركين عهد عند الله وعند رسوله إلا الذين عاهدتم عند المسجد الحرام فما استقاموا لكم فاستقيموا لهم إن الله يحب المتقين. كيف وإن يظهروا عليكم لا يرقبوا فيكم إلا ولا ذمة يرضونكم بأفواههم وتأبى قلوبهم وأكثرهم فاسقون. اشتروا بآيات الله ثمنا قليلا فصدوا عن سبيله إنهم ساء ما كانوا يعملون. لا يرقبون في مؤمن إلا ولا ذمة وأولئك هم المعتدون. فإن تابوا وأقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة فإخوانكم في الدين ونفصل الآيات لقوم يعلمون وإن نكثوا أيمانهم من بعد عهدهم وطعنوا في دينكم فقاتلوا أئمة الكفر إنهم لا أيمان لهم لعلهم ينتهون ألا تقاتلون قوما نكثوا أيمانهم وهموا بإخراج الرسول وهم بدؤوكم أول مرة أتخشونهم فالله أحق أن تخشوه إن كنتم مؤمنين قاتلوهم يعذبهم الله بأيديكم ويخزهم وينصركم عليهم ويشف صدور قوم مؤمنين ويذهب غيظ قلوبهم ويتوب الله على من يشاء والله عليم حكيم أم حسبتم أن تتركوا ولما يعلم الله الذين جاهدوا منكم ولم يتخذوا من دون الله ولا رسوله ولا المؤمنين وليجا والله خبير بما تعملون ما كان للمشركين أن يعمروا مساجد الله شاهدين على أنفسهم بالكفر أولئك حبطت أعمالهم وفي النار هم خالدون إنما يعمر مساجد الله من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر وأقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة ولم يخش إلا الله فعسى أولئك أن يكونوا من المهتدين أجعلتم سقاية الحاج وعمارة المسجد الحرام كمن آمن بالله واليوم الآخر وجاهد في سبيل الله لا يستوون عند الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين الذين آمنوا وهاجروا وجاهدوا في سبيل الله بأموالهم وأنفسهم أعظم درجة عند الله وأولئك هم الفائزون صدق الله العلي العظيم. الفاتحة مع الصلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Thank you so much, Brother Mustafa, for that beautiful recitation. We'll now have our main segment. I'm really looking forward to hearing Dr. Sama give his talk. It's been a while since we've had her. On finding our purpose, how less is more. Please welcome her with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الشيطان الرجيم. Can you hear me okay? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبا القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. قال الله في محكم كتابه الكريم بعد أن أقول أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ألهاكم التكاثر حتى زرتم المقابر. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm both honored and humbled to be with you this evening, and I'm glad to see such beautiful faces. Thank you for taking your time, your very precious time, as you will see from my talk, how precious and valuable your time is. So I appreciate it immensely. Thank you. So how I came to this topic is a bit of a life's journey, really. It's been a very gradual process of being a child that is very possessive and attached to things sentimentally. Everything held a sentimental value. Oh, I was wearing this when this happened. I was holding this when that happened. Somebody gave me this when whatever. And so, although I didn't have very much, I accumulated things over time, and they meant a lot to me sentimentally. Now, over time, having married someone who's not so keen on material possessions, and also life taking me from lots of moving as a student, and then lots of moving as a parent, gradually over time, I've become more and more upset with possessions, more and more tied down and weighed down by possessions. And so I just thought it was just a huge change. How can that occur to someone? And I founded a concept that I'm seeming to believe is more and more important in my life, and so I thought I would share it. And although we don't always necessarily find things inscribed in the Holy Quran about every single thing we got in life, about this particular concept, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has referred to it in various ways. And the one most poignant to me is Surah Al-Takathur, which is the 102nd surah of the Holy Quran. And how did this go? There we are. And by focusing on just the first two ayahs of this holy surah, we are able to grasp the majority of the concepts of the surah. And I think it's quite important for our discussion today. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Alhaakum al-Takathur. And a very simplistic, quick translation of that is the want of more and more and more has distracted you. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used two words, Alhaakum and Al-Takathur. So we'll look at both of those words separately. Al-Hakum comes from the root word, and a lot of us who are from an Arabic background know that most words go back to a root word. So it goes back to the root word lahu, la, lam, ha, waw, lahu. And in essence, lahu is the distraction from something that has taken you away from something else. And linguistically, it tends to refer to something that is of less importance, distracting you from something that is of a greater importance. And so it describes the losing out on an opportunity, the losing out on time, the losing out on things that are valuable by things that are of less value. Luhwa is also referred to, this is a little bit disgusting, I apologize, a piece of food that sometimes catches between the teeth, and although it has nutritional value, we deem it completely valueless and we just toss it away. And so tossing something that is good away because we have not put any value on it. So that's lahu. And also in classical Arabic, lahu refers to any form of entertainment. So whether it's song, dance, poetry, in our day and age, movies, video games, chatting, whatever, those, any form of entertainment, something that you take a break to do. Now, takathur comes from kuthra, and there are 4 implications of kuthra. The first one is the want of more and more quantity. And so I've got something, and I'm completely satisfied with whatever it is I've got, but suddenly I see someone else next door to me who's got more of the same thing. I want the same, if not more. So for example, I've got 5 Pokemon cards. I'm very pleased with my 5 Pokemon cards until I see that Mujtaba's got 10. And then I not only want 10, I possibly want more. And so I'm completely and overwhelmingly preoccupied by the need to get to 10 cards, if not more. Okay, so that's one implication of kuthra. The second is once I've obtained the 10 or more, I'm wanting to show off about it. Okay, so nah, look at me, I've got 10, and I've got 12, and you've only got 10 now. That's another implication of kuthra. The third doesn't necessarily have to do with anyone else. So I could be the world's most, the richest person, the biggest billionaire in the world. No one can come near the riches I've got, but I just have this drive for more and more and more, and this drive is just completely overwhelming me. It is an obsession. I just want more because I want more. So that's another implication of kuthra. And finally, the 4th implication is what's called al-hubb al-mushtarak al-kuthra, which is a way of saying the communal love of more. And so we're all, although we are human beings, we all live within a society, and within each society, we're in a miniature society of our own close-knit friends, our own extended families. And so sometimes there are expectations by those around us for us to achieve a certain thing by a certain age, for us to possess something by a certain deadline. I've got a friend, for example, in London. Her car broke down many months ago, and she's doing absolutely fine, despite having no car, using public transport, taking her kids to school, dropping them off, going to work, all that. But the pressure on her to get a car, because it's the thing to do, that is the 4th implication. It's what's otherwise known in like the Western world as keeping up with the Joneses. Yeah? So those are the 4 implications of kuthra. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not say ashghalakum al-takathur? Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say alhaakum al-takathur? And some say it is because shughul is actually a fundamental need. We need to work in order to survive. But entertainment is a side thing. Entertainment is something we do as a break. And so another way what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying is that you are completely preoccupied and completely overwhelmed by all this entertainment. It is completely possessing you. And so when someone is constantly doing something that's considered entertainment, they're spending their entire time playing video games or spending their entire time watching movies, we usually call them losers, don't we? Because they're not really achieving anything else. And subhanallah, the very next surah after this is Surah Al-Asr, and Allah says, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. Human beings are at an immense loss. So it's tying in with the whole concept of loss and the loss of something very precious, which is actually is time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says alhaakum instead of yulhikum. He's talking in the past tense, and it's as if to say that up until this point in your life, you've only been distracted. Distractions have completely overtaken your life, and you have not reached your potential yet. Okay? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't mention what we're being distracted from. And that's actually intentionally left out, because that is for us to ponder over. Is there something that is of more value that I could be doing with my time rather than doing X, Y, and Z that I'm doing right now? And the answer to that for you would be different to that of your neighbor. Because your skill sets and your abilities are what Allah gave you, and He gave somebody else a completely different skill set. صلى على محمد وعلى محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Our entire religion is actually, if you look at a lot of things, I mean, the concept of Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah is not time dependent, but a lot of our worship is. Our prayer, Hajj, Ramadan, even Khums. And the largest things that are most prominent in the sky when we look up are the sun and the moon, our clock and our calendar. And it is as if everything by design in our religion is trying to teach us time management. SubhanAllah. Yet here we are, completely distracted by all this noise, all this static, I like to call it. And so, am I really meant to take a break? Am I really not meant to ever take a break in life? Is that what Allah is saying here? Of course not. A break is a break. It's, I've worked hard, I've put in a lot of effort, and I need a bit of downtime. That's absolutely fine. And what Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, ما قل وكفى خير مما كثر وألهى. So what he's saying is, what is little and enough is better than what is a lot and distracting. And that is pretty much, the balance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is come closer, is aiming for us to have a balance. So it's okay if we have a game on our phone. It's okay if we watch a movie. It's okay, it's not haram or anything like that. It's all about the balance. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala moves on to the second ayah, which is حَتَّى زُرْتُمُ الْمَقَابِرِ, until you visit the graves. So Allah is commenting about how long are you going to continue to do this? Is it until you visit the graves? And there is two tafasir of visiting the graves. One is that it's believed that the reason the ayah came down is when two tribes were in a quarrel and they were fighting, and one was competing with the other. Oh yeah, we've got more members, we are bigger, we are better. And so they start to name all their members that are alive, and then they start to name all those who have passed on as well, who have died. And it's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, are you really stooping to this level where you are competing in the number of people you've got who have died? You are visiting the graves, which is meant to be somewhere where you're supposed to have a reality check, yet you're still completely overwhelmed by this comparison and wanting to be better and bigger and more. How awful, in other words. The other tafsir is that no, it is actually referring to death itself. And so if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, are you really going to carry on doing this until the day you die? It's pretty damning, isn't it? But also the sarcasm in the word zurtum. Because zurtum means to visit. And a visit is firstly meant to be voluntary. You volunteered to go somewhere. You're not carried without you wishing to. Secondly, it's a temporary arrangement. You go to visit somewhere and you come back. You don't stay there permanently. And it's as if Allah is saying, look at all these other people who came to visit here and remain here forevermore. And so, that's in a nutshell the tafsir of these two ayahs. What I'd like to do is take a minute or so, not much longer than that. I'd like you to either contemplate with your own self, if you are too shy about it, or with your neighbor, if you're feeling overly, in a sharing mood. Think about, number one, how long, on average, you spend on social media in a day. And number two, estimate how many items of garments or clothing you have in your bedroom wardrobe. Go ahead.
0 minutes on social media. I've blocked wasting my time. I'm like an extension. I'm going to extension because I want to 1 minute. Yeah. MashaAllah, MashaAllah. No minutes. 1 day. No minutes. MashaAllah, MashaAllah, MashaAllah. 1 minute. 30 seconds. Yeah, I think we're set, Shabbat.
And then there's some that I've been trying to get rid of to get into
My cousin's just building different color t-shirts.
صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So I'm sorry if I made you do something that completely embarrassed you, but it's designed to think about things that we might not necessarily be thinking about in the distractions of everyday life. So a few facts that might be a little bit, well, they were alarming to me. So I'm just going to share them and see. So we live in a world that's actually more, distractions are more available than they ever were in the generation of our parents, our grandparents. If you go back 100 years, the most exciting thing that you can be distracted with is like climbing a tree or whatever. So, interestingly, back in 2007, the average person was exposed to, get this, 5,000 ads per day. 5,000 ads per day. Today, the average person is exposed to 10,000 ads per day. So that's billboards, television ads, ads on social media, the bars on websites, everything. 10,000 ads a day. And so I did a little bit of a calculation. In Australia, the average life expectancy these days is 84 years. So if we are very conservative and say that a person doesn't begin to regularly use the internet and social media until about the age of 15, so that's about 69 years of, how many ads will we have been exposed to in those 69 years? So if we take, that's assuming also that the number of ads don't change per day. So we're still at 10,000 a day. 250 million ads. So, in addition to that, 57.3% of Australians admitted to spending on things they don't need. 43.7% admitted to wasting food in the fridge or pantry. So these are items of food that were bought with the intention of consuming them, but they went off before we consumed them. The average person spends 2 hours and 27 minutes a day on social media. So if we assume we are awake for 16 hours a day, we are spending about 16% of our day, 16%, on social media. Now, for teens and young adults, it's worse. It's 5.8 hours a day. Again, if you're assuming you're awake for 16 hours, that's 36% of the waking day. That's more than a third of the waking day. In 2019, the average number of wardrobe items per person, per consumer worldwide, was 136 items. But of course, that's very skewed, because if you look at poor countries versus affluent countries, there would be a huge discrepancy, and so the affluent countries would be very high in order to counteract the very low numbers in the poor countries. But not only that, in a lot of countries, people only have in their wardrobe what's in season. And so if you multiply by 2 for what's in storage, you get a very high number. Interestingly though, this bit I found very interesting. Out of all those wardrobe items, only 10% are wearable. They're either too short, too long, too tight, too wide, too whatever. Only 10% are wearable. And get this, 1 out of 9 people is regularly late for work because they're unable to put together a wardrobe in the morning, despite all those items. This is a shocker. The percentage of children who live in the US is 3.1% of the world's children, yet they consume 40% of the world's toys. 40% of the world's toys for 3.1% of children. And the toy industry in Australia is worth $3.7 billion per year, and the average child will have $9,037 worth of toys spent on them between the ages of 2 and 12. Now, up to 100 billion garments are produced worldwide each year. With 8 billion occupants on this earth, one would average 12 to 14 new items of clothing per year, but we know that is not the case for poor countries. So I leave you to do the maths to work out how many new items we consume a year. Now, out of the 55 to 85 billion garments that are bought, 60%, so that's 33 to 51 billion pieces of garments, are discarded within 1 year of production. If that is not disposable fashion, I don't know what is. I'm actually known for really hating laundry, and I used to always say, especially when the kids were young, if somebody was to invent disposable clothing, I'd buy it for my boys. But really, I think we are in a world now where there is disposable clothing. Fashion is disposable. And in a time when we are acquiring so much, so often, some scholars are thinking, is that in fact beginning to impact on our relationships? And our relationships becoming more and more disposable, more and more superficial, because we feel that, oh, it's not worth rectifying this misunderstanding. It's not worth doing this. I'll just move on to the next person. I've got another 100 people that are following me that I can chat to or whatever. So there is also a lot of knock-on effects of this disposable, highly consumable world that we're in. 92 million tons of textiles end up in landfill every single year. So that is the equivalent of, so it's akin to one garbage truck full of textiles going to the dumpster every single second. One garbage truck full of textiles to the dumpster every single second. And of course, we haven't spoken about the environmental and ethical implications. You know, these artificial textiles break down into microparticles that are not, that are harmful to the earth, etc. And as a consequence to all of this, the self-storage industry is booming and is worth 1.5 billion per year in Australia. And the trend is rising every year because we've got so much that we need to hire storage facilities in order to put away all of our things. So what do these bursting cupboards, these overwhelming number of apps and notifications and messages and clutter and just all this static, what is it doing to our mind and our body? So, clutter and chaos have been shown to increase anxiety, affect sleep, and impact on the ability to focus. They trigger coping and avoidance strategies that, don't laugh, but it's true, that result in over-snacking on junk and spending hours watching television because we're avoiding all the stress that we're in. And in fact, one study showed that people who are completely overwhelmed by lots of things around them end up consuming 3 times more junk than those who are not. So clutter and general distraction impact us over time. These piles of stuff that we've got accumulating everywhere have an accumulative effect on our brains, and they drain our resources, they reduce our focus, and they decrease our working memory. And research has confirmed that they have physiological impact and actually increase our cortisol levels, which is our stress hormone. And so over time, we are actually constantly in what's called low-grade fight or flight response, which is a response our body's meant to have during extreme emergency situations. So this is very taxing on our body, and over time leads to physiological changes that put us at risk of chronic diseases such as type 2 diabetes and heart disease. So it's not, a laughing matter that we just snack on extra cookies. It has big effects. And actually, if you are surrounded by lots of stuff, it doesn't go away when you sleep. So it's been proven by research that not only is it more difficult to fall asleep, once you actually fall asleep, you have disturbed sleep if you are in an environment that's full of stuff. And of course, as far as toys are concerned, research has shown that the less toys at any one time that a child has will result in better quality play that will build their concentration skills and encourage more creativity. And I can attest to that. The first year we were here in Australia, our stuff, speaking of stuff, our stuff arrived in boxes, and we kept the boxes, the empty boxes, in a spare room. And although we had a dream playroom where the boys had tons of toys, they loved playing in the room that was full of boxes. And they spent hours having a great time. And we only got rid of those boxes when we had to move house. And of course, having less toys naturally helps kids develop a greater appreciation and sense of gratitude. And I can attest to that as well. As a child, around 5.5 or 6 years old, we were moving countries from one country to another. And our parents told me, my sister, and my brother, we're giving away all your toys, but don't be upset. When we get to the new country, we'll get you each a toy. And true to their word, when we got to the new country, we each got one big toy, and that baby doll that was in a basket, that had an outfit that matched its hat and its basket skirt, lived with me for many years, and I treasured it because I didn't have that many toys, so it was very precious to me. As far as multitasking and shifting from one task to another, we've got our mobile, we've got 100 things going on. Research has shown that it costs up to 40% of productive time, which is equivalent to dropping 10 IQ points from our cognitive performance. So we're not doing not only ourselves a disservice, we're doing whoever we're doing work for a disservice as well, because we're doing it with 10 IQ points less. Right, so what I'd like us to do now is imagine. Imagine you've been told you're going to go into a beautiful garden, okay? The entrance to this garden is, from it, you cannot see the exit point. You are going to stay in this garden, and it is a garden that is unusual because it has all the flowers that you could ever imagine, and they're all in bloom at once, which is unheard of in nature because things have seasons, don't they? So all in bloom, any flower you could imagine, and you can have any of it that you like, okay? It is there for the taking. But what you're not told is how long you've got in this garden, okay? So you enter this garden and you're completely taken by all the shapes, by all the colors, by all the smells, the fragrances. It's just all overwhelming. And you walk and you reach a rose section. Colors, shapes, sizes of immense variety that you've never seen. And you stop and you smell the roses and you touch it and you're just completely taken over by it. You start cutting to make a bouquet. Then suddenly you realize you're conscious of time. You don't know how long you've got in this garden. Oops, let me get a move on it. So then you start walking and you get to a tulip section. You've got your roses in your hands, and now you're seeing tulips of all sorts of colors and shapes and sizes. Some are double tulips. How gorgeous! And you're completely, mesmerized by it all. And you start cutting because you can. This has all been made for you. You can take as much as you like. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made this garden all for you. So you take your tulips and then you realize, oh my gosh, time. So you move on and you find yourself in the daffodil section. Again, all sorts of beautiful things. You're taken by it, you start cutting, you gather, your bouquet is getting bigger and more gorgeous, and you're conscious of time again. Oops, I better move. Get to the hydrangea section. Oh my gosh, the shades, it's just overwhelmingly gorgeous. You can't describe it. And your bouquet is just getting more and more beautiful, and then you realize time, I better move. And you get to the heather section. It's gorgeous, colors and shades and tall and short and all sorts. And again, you gather some. And all of a sudden, you've got this stunning box of the most beautiful flowers you could ever imagine. You can't have even imagined this. But look at you. Your hands have aged. Your body has aged. Everything about you is slower. And then, ding, 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 your time's up. You've not found the exit. And so, this is very much, although a very imaginary scenario, trying to describe what life is. So, life is very much a very short journey through a very beautiful garden. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created all of this for us, and almost all of it is halal, and almost all of it we can have. But we have an unknown time frame. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, when He's talking to the people in the afterlife, He tells them, قَالَ كَمْ لَبِثْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ عَدَدَ السِّنِينَ. Allah asks them, for how many years did you stay on earth? قَالُوا لَبِثْنَا يَوْمًا أَوْ بَعْضَ يَوْمٍ فَاسْأَلِ الْعَادِينَ. They say, we stayed maybe for a day, maybe part of a day. We're not sure. Ask those who keep count. And really, it reminds me, firstly, we don't know how long we've got. Some have got a very short time, some have got a very long time. But really, even if it's 100 years, it's still very short. Just yesterday, some of you know I work in aged care, and one of the ladies, I was sitting with her and her husband, they moved into aged care, and she said something that was so poignant. She said, old age crept up on us. And that was aha moment for me. It really does creep up on one, doesn't it? So although the journey is short, there are very, very important goals that we're meant to find within this beautiful garden. And we can't be distracted by all this beautiful, this permissible stuff that is surrounding us. We have free will. We could go in any direction in this garden. But the art, and some might say the wisdom, is in finding that balance. And so all these possessions, all these apps, and all these whatnots, they're distracting us and can easily lead us astray. And so I believe streamlining our existence by removing clutter and friction will enable us to have an easier and more productive journey. Our days will automatically become more fruitful. Clearing out stuff from our lives will automatically leave time for the important things in life. And Allah didn't stipulate what these other important things are. They're for us, as I said, to discover. For each of us, it is different. And even if we declutter our existence and we are only left with free time, then that in itself is a win, because pondering and reflecting is a very praiseworthy act of worship. And in fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَوَلَمْ يَتَفَكَّرُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ وَأَجَلٍ مُسَمًّى وَإِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِنَ النَّاسِ بِلِقَاءِ رَبِّهِمْ لَكَافِرُونَ. Do they not reflect on themselves? Allah created heavens and the earth and whatever lies between them in truth and for an appointed term. Yet many people deny that they will meet their Lord. When one contemplates on the heavens and the earth, the first thing which becomes apparent is that the Creator is orderly, methodical, and precise. I should aspire to those godly attributes. The second thing which becomes apparent is that this orderly existence had a beginning, and just as it had a beginning, it must therefore have an end. And so the hereafter is guaranteed. And Imam Ali alayhi salam says, التفكر في آلاء الله نعمة العبادة. Contemplation in the blessings of Allah is an excellent form of worship. He also says, التفكر يدعو إلى البر والعمل به. Contemplation invites one towards good deeds and its performance. And so by contemplating, we are pulled towards performing good. So we've spoken about all the clutter, all the static, all the distractions, the impact they have on our body and our soul and our mind, and how precious time is. So what about practically? What are some strategies that we can use in order to declutter our life? And so I speak from a standpoint where I now actually look at all my possessions and wish I could just pick them up and throw them away, but obviously I can't. So, take what you will of this and see if there's anything there that you can implement in your life. So number one, we did it together, and that is look at the time spent on your mobile. Are there any pitfalls? So if it says I've spent 5 hours on YouTube, was that on shorts and I'm just sort of flicking and I've got no comprehension of what's coming next, I haven't chosen it, it's not something that's going to educate me, it's not something that's going to elevate me? If so, maybe I can turn those 5 hours into 4 next week. Having goals depending on what the pitfalls are. The other strategy is the one in, one out strategy. And I learned this actually a long time ago from a friend in Canada when she first had children. And she said, when I give them a toy, they automatically have to give one away. And that automatically keeps things in check. They don't snowball. The other concept is a container method. We all have things that we find, that we consider treasures. Maybe you collect gnomes or something, and you just simply can't live without your gnomes. A good concept to sort of keep those in check is choosing a home for them in your house and using a container to house those things. And once you have reached the limit of that container, that is it. You have contained it in that. You are allowed to have this much of this very treasured thing. Okay? The container method. The other very important thing is remembering that fashion is meant to change constantly. It is meant to act in a way that makes people buy things week in, week out. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to stay in business. And so being smarter about buying things. Am I going to be able to wear this now only? Or is it timeless and I'm able to wear it next year also and 2 years down the line? So fashion is a big one. The other thing is being aware of very cheap dopamine. So the opening of a box that's arrived in the post because 2 nights ago I went on a shopping spree on my phone. Or, getting likes on my post, or, how many followers I've got. Those are cheap forms of dopamine. And what I'd like to think is we should train the brain to crave valuable dopamine, okay? So, big things, worthy things. For example, organizing this program, Jazakumullah Khair Jaza, Barakah program, volunteers. That is rich dopamine. Setting up a donation drive, I don't know, big things that would give you the dopamine, but it is very valuable dopamine that will last more than the 1 or 2 seconds. Okay? Being mindful in our actions, just generally. So mindful when I'm shopping, mindful when I'm using social media, etc. That will automatically, take you back. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? Is this useful use of my time? Prioritizing contemplation time. That is, so we are all about prioritizing. We got here because we prioritized it. Otherwise, we'd be home on a Friday evening. We pray our 5 prayers because we prioritize them. Without them, we're unable to, be ourselves. So each of us have a priority list that is subconscious. Putting contemplation time within our week or month or whatever it is automatically enables you that time to contemplate. And spending time in nature, because it's been shown that spending time somewhere open and large gives you perspective. And of course, we spoke about the marvel and the wonder of Allah's creations and how important that is. Another strategy is befriending a like-minded person. So it's always easier to do things when your friends are doing it, and it goes back to the communal love of more. So if your community is automatically one that loves, things that are not more in a worldly sense, but more in a godly sense, then you will be aspiring to that, won't you? And if you are not so lucky to have a like-minded person, then just talking about your newfound love for less to your friends. So, oh, did you know that I have found that I've got 300 items in my wardrobe and my target is to bring it down to 250 by, Christmas or something. Talking about it. And sometimes doing it once won't do. Or did you know I spent 5 hours on YouTube and I'm going to try to bring it down to 4 by next month. Mentioning it once might not have an impact, but repeated mentioning will invite others to also contemplate on their time. And of course, being wise on how we spend time, because it is our most prized possession. Things that we can declutter very quickly. Apps. We have about a bajillion apps on our mobiles. Some we use too much, so they might need decluttering. Others we use very little, and they might need decluttering. Email subscriptions. We get like 7,000 emails a day about, from subscriptions we don't even remember taking part in. Just get rid of those. That's clutter that we don't need in our life. And just by the off chance that one of them is tempting and is part of that 10,000 ad thing that we're all, exposed to every day, just unsubscribe from all those email subscriptions. Loyalty cards, get rid of them. Wardrobe. I look at my wardrobes, everything is squished, I can't see what's in there, this is too short, this is too small, this is when I was fat, this is when I was thin, this is when I get bigger, this is when I get taller, Let's have things in there that are all wearable instead of 90% unwearable, as research has shown us. And by having 100% wearable stuff, A, there'll be less of them, but B, things will be, the mundane things in life, which is like getting ready in the morning, will automatically become faster, and we can focus on things that are more important. Storage. Storage is a tried and tested method of you recognizing that you haven't used this thing in 3 years, so it is very likely you don't need whatever is in that box. You haven't used it in 3 years, so you're not going to use it. Just give it away to somebody who might make use of it. And finally, decluttering our schedules. We live in a world where we are all hyper busy and we almost wear it as a badge of honor. But really, as we said, our time is our most precious possession, our most prized possession, and we should value it. And sometimes there are things on our schedule that don't necessarily fit into the purpose we've got in this beautiful world that Allah's given us to help us find our purpose and harness it. And so that brings us to our conclusion. And in conclusion, sisters and brothers, on this very short journey, let's clear out our lives and make space for what's most important. Let's find our purpose. Let's focus on our goal. Let's travel lighter. Let's subtract in order to add. Because in this case, less is most certainly more. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi bayti al-tayyibin al-tahirin.
اللهم صل على